13-inch iPad Air really isn't that difficult to review because it consists of tech that we've seen in the iPad lineup for the past few years. Most specifically are obviously the iPad Air design that was introduced in 2020 with Touch ID and the power button and all that. And of course, this was derived from the iPad Pro 2018 design. And this form factor, 12.9 inches, has been around since 2015 with the introduction of the first iPad Pro. So again, this is just a remix, sort of a Frankenstein iPad, sort of an iPad Pro from yesteryear, repackaged into a more affordable model, which is great for people who don't want to spend an arm and a leg on a giant iPad. Now you can get it for under $1,000 USD, which is great. However, for now, this price point is just a little interesting, especially if you're somebody who is tech savvy, into specs and all of that. And that's what we're going to be digging into today. First up though, I at least have to go over hardware a little bit, even though it's stuff that, again, we've seen for the past couple years here. iPad Air design, just bigger, Touch ID and the power button, stereo speakers, USB-C, and of course, the Apple Pencil 2nd gen style design, even though, of course, this is the Apple Pencil Pro, but we'll talk about that a bit later here. What's new here really is the form factor and more so the display. This is a 13-inch, more so 12.9-inch rounded up LCD display here. That is similar, or if not identical, to the tech that we've seen in the 3rd and 4th gen iPad Pros. Maybe a little bit brighter. I'll put a little correction if I'm wrong. But the only difference is that it's capped at 60 Hertz, which is not a big deal to most people. Most people don't know what refresh rate is, and I would imagine this also saves on battery life too, which is, something that's probably more of a priority for more typical users. But anyway, this display is still great. Even though it's 60 Hertz, it doesn't really bother me that much, and I don't think it would bother the sort of target demographic either, who will be web surfing and just doing more typical tasks on here, even some more intensive ones. But anyway, I really think that this display is great for people who want to multitask. They want to have 2 windows open, or they want to have a nice big video playing off of, Netflix, YouTube, etc. Like I said earlier in the video, it's so nice to be able to get this form factor at a sub $1,000 price point, because in the past you'd have to spend all that money brand new to get an iPad this big, or you would have to go with something used, which wasn't a big deal. But in 2015 you didn't have a choice. You had to cough up the money to get a big iPad like this, and not everybody wants an iPad Pro. But beyond the display though, next up we're going to talk about the front-facing camera and Apple Pencil situation, which are linked together because Apple had to re-engineer sort of how the Apple Pencil mechanism or charging or adhesion works, magnetically with the chassis, because we now have a front-facing camera mounted landscape around the side where there used to be nothing. So they had to space things out a little more, re-engineer stuff, which is why we have Apple Pencil Pro support. But first up, I want to quickly talk about the front-facing camera. I mean, I don't use it all the time, but the iPad is a great device to video chat on, and I think that since they want to market this as sort of a computer, possibly laptop competitor, it only makes sense to have this mounted here. And I'm all for it. I think that the side or the portrait mounted camera was a bit awkward in previous models here. But again, this of course had them re-engineer the pencil mechanism, magnets in there. So they just said probably like, screw it, we're gonna give the iPad Air Apple Pencil Pro support, but also Apple Pencil USB-C support, because that works with the 10th gen, which has a similar camera situation. That pencil, of course, I don't have it on hand, has a little cap that comes off. You charge it via USB-C, hence the name, and it's pretty much a stylus, no pressure sensitivity or anything. With the Apple Pencil Pro, you get everything that you get with the Apple Pencil 2nd gen, but a few more extra features, of course, like barrel roll, if I can even demo that here. Also, this pressure sensor, which brings up a menu with more tools, which is really nice. That might be my favorite feature, but barrel roll is nice too for artists or people who want to do calligraphy or more fine handwriting or whatever here. And I can, of course, squeeze this, go to eraser. I honestly like it more than using the tap sensor, which is still, a thing in here. You also have Find My support, so if you lose your pencil, you'll actually be able to find it. It won't just evaporate into the Twilight Zone, which is nice here. And of course, it charges just like the Apple Pencil 2nd gen on the side of your iPad, which is super convenient. And finally, the last two things I want to discuss with this tablet are its new base storage capacity and accessory compatibility. First up, we get 128GB standard base tier, 64 was absolutely horrific. It should have died like 2-3 years ago. You cannot store anything on there. The operating system already takes up a few gigabytes, so you'd be lucky to get a few apps on there, maybe a movie, maybe a few songs. You know, creative projects out of the question unless you're working on them on the cloud. With 128 gigabytes, you at least have a little bit of wiggle room to work with, which is nice. If you're a more typical user, you have a lot of headroom. And if you're doing more intensive stuff, you at least have some space to work with here. So that's great. I have a 1 terabyte model here, but 128 gigabytes would do for, I think, most of you out there just wanting a big iPad to do big iPad things with, you know, from productivity to gameplay, you know, streaming, whatever, even a little bit of creative work here. And secondly, this tablet is compatible with the iPad Pro 12.9 inches previous Magic Keyboard, or the first gen Magic Keyboard, the same way iPad Air 5 and iPad Air 4 were compatible with the smaller version of this. The bigger version is now compatible with this model because it's pretty much the same size and form factor as the previous gen iPad Pro 12.9 inches, especially with the smart connector. And conveniently bringing that tablet up brings us to the next portion of this video. As great of a value as the iPad Air 13-inch is, you know, sub $1,000, you know, $800 for all this hardware here, which is great. I mean, like, again, it's nothing new, but it's great that you can get a big iPad for, again, less than $1,000. It, unfortunately, for now, has an indirect sort of in the same family competitor, if that makes sense, and that is, as I just mentioned, the iPad Pro 12.9 inch. But before we talk about this, I want to quickly talk about today's video sponsor, Paperlike, and the amazing accessories that they make for iPad in general here. First up, we have the tried and true Paperlike 2.1 screen protector here. And something I want to bring up that I haven't brought up before is the tech in here. I want to sort of make a difference or define a difference between the new nano texture in the new iPad Pros and the nano dots found in the screen protector. Nano texture in the new iPad Pro displays is primarily or only really used to disperse light, you know, more evenly so you have less glare. The nano dot technology in here is what brings you the paper-like feel, which is so great because, again, as I've been saying for years, this is pretty much a one-to-one experience with like writing with a pen or pencil in a notebook, which is really, really great. So again, even though the new nano texture technology may sort of seem like it offers the same experience, it really doesn't. And the best part is you can take this off if you no longer want it, you know, whereas with the nano texture display, it's, you know, you're kind of stuck with it. And, you know, it's, you know, a built-in feature. And speaking of notebook feel, they also have this wonderful case here, or folio, which is made out of polyurethane, but it also just feels like, you know, a nice little notebook cover. So to complement the paper-like experience that you get, which, you know, makes your handwriting and drawing a lot nicer, you can get this nice sort of notebook cover to go with it here. Also a pencil grip if you're interested. Unfortunately, this color was exclusive to a Canupsi specific pack or accessory you could buy back then, but they offer ones that look just like this. But yeah, anyway, overall, I love the paper-like experience. It is a vital accessory if you have an Apple Pencil with your iPad and you want to get the most out of it. You want to have a really realistic feel while you're sketching or drawing, and the case just brings everything to the next level. It also has a little Apple Pencil flap to protect your Apple Pencil, if I didn't mention that already here. It's a slick setup, and I will leave a link to everything in the video description down below if you're interested. But anyway, as I was saying, the iPad Pro 12.9 inch 6th gen specifically sort of unintentionally competes with the new iPad Air. And don't get me wrong, the new iPad Air has some tricks up its sleeve, but the old Pro slaps back with some stuff that's pretty major, again, if you're somebody that cares about the specs and you're tech savvy and you want to get the most for your money. First up, the displays are very different here, at least in the 12.9 inch models here. I mean, again, the 13-inch iPad Air is just 12.9 inches rounded up. And even though I said the 12.9 inch display is similar to the tech found in the 3rd and 4th gen Pros, if you remember the 5th gen Pro and up, or, you know, 5th and 6th gen Pros, have mini LED displays. So still LCD, but you get a lot more contrast and brightness here with the 6th Gen Pro, at least in specific conditions. So, for the most part, SDR stuff's gonna look the same, but if you're watching, for example, HDR video, if I can pull some up here. And here we go, you're probably not gonna be able to see the difference on camera, but I certainly can, because the difference with mini LED and standard LCD is that you have backlit dimming zones with this more advanced display, which means that your highlights or whites get really, really bright in some conditions if it's HDR, so that's max 1600 nits sometimes, full screen 1000 nits for some creative applications because just the backlight's more powerful and there's just more nuance to how the screen is lit. Whereas with this, you get 600 nits standard SDR in every case, which isn't bad because that's the max brightness you get with, for example, the studio display, which is a pretty bright monitor and an expensive one at that. However, yeah, the contrast here is just way better, 1,000,000 to 1 compared to, I think, 1,000 to 1. So if you're somebody doing creative stuff, this will make a difference in some cases here. And if you're watching HDR, like movies or content, this will make a difference because you won't be able to do the same here because, yeah, it's just a different display. It might even save on battery life. And another aspect that might save on battery life, again, is the refresh rate. Once again, this is locked at 60 hertz, which many people don't care about. I honestly don't with this device. I kind of know who it's intended for, whatever, whereas with this, you get 120 hertz, which is definitely a treat. One of the reasons why I've always loved the iPad Pro and just ProMotion displays in general. So yeah, this is something that will make a difference if you're somebody who cares, and I say all this because these devices are a very similar price. If that hasn't already been made clear, maybe I didn't say that earlier. You can get this roughly the same cost used compared to this new, but I'll show you listings later in the video here. We also have a difference in speaker quality. We have a quad speaker setup here and a stereo speaker setup here, and unlike display quality, we can actually kind of sort of test it. So let me pull up some non-copyrighted music to listen to. Okay, here we go. I don't love this song, but it will do here. Let's place some audio on the air. Okay, iPad Pro. Okay, it's similar volume, but the bass is a lot better here because of the quad speaker setup. So if you're an audio person, whether you're mixing stuff, creating stuff, or just watching a movie or listening to music, yeah, you get better speakers here because stereo versus quad setup. So pretty simple there. You also get better mics in here. I'm not going to test that honestly because I kind of am an advocate for actual mic equipment. I'm using one right now, but if you want to record stuff directly onto your iPad, the mic quality is going to be better here. There's just more mics happening. I think there's even more mics happening here than in the new Pro because of the new design, but that's neither here nor there. We also have a better connector on the Pro here. Let me stack them up here for you real quick. And this isn't to say that the port on the iPad Air is bad by any means. It's a 10 gigabit port. It can support external monitors, support with Stage Manager, fast file transfer, etc. But it does not compete with the Thunderbolt bandwidth that you get here with the Pro, 40 gigabits per second. Which, I mean, may not make a difference to some people, especially if you're a more casual user, so don't sweat it if you're not doing anything pro level. But if you want longevity, more bandwidth, yeah, you're getting more for your money here, 4 times more if you want to get into the nerdy math and all that, 40 gigabits versus 10 gigabits. We also have a difference in biometric unlock, so Touch ID like all the iPad Airs released since 2020, and Face ID with the iPad Pro, which has been around since 2018. And yeah, I mean, I like both for different reasons. I think that Touch ID is generally pretty convenient in any orientation, but you do have to physically reach out. With Face ID, it'll just work like magic, like, without you even thinking about it. However, you have to have your face pointed at it. So there are some orientations where it doesn't work. So I guess the trade-off is you can use Touch ID in any orientation. You just have to make sure your fingers are clean and like you actually physically touch the sensor. Whereas with Face ID in most orientations, it will work even flat on a surface like this, from kind of far away too, I think. Actually, let me see here. Yeah, there we go. So I don't have to be like this, but at the same time though, you have to, make sure it's pointed at you. Otherwise it won't work. So, depends on what you enjoy. I personally like Face ID better, but Touch ID is fine, you know, it's pretty convenient too, but you know, you be the judge of that, I guess. The back-facing cameras are also a bit different, and of course the front-facing camera on the iPad Air has a superior, you know, orientation, but you know, again, back-facing camera-wise, the iPad Pro has a far more advanced system, a 1x and a 0.5x, which is also not found on the new iPad Pros, funnily enough. So the new iPad Pro is more similarly equipped to the new iPad Air, but here you get 2 cameras and a LiDAR sensor, which is on the new Pro as well. But the LiDAR sensor allows you to scan 3D environments and just sort of, you know, use it for specific workflows and apps. If you know who you are and you know what this is, I guess you're probably gonna go for an iPad Pro anyway. But if you're on a budget, don't go for the iPad Air because you won't have this. You also lack a flash, which is kind of useful for scanning documents or taking pictures of things. So, you know, think about that here, although the shooter on here isn't bad, 12 megapixels, capable of 4K video. But yeah, I would say the biggest deal here is no flash, and in some people's cases, no LiDAR, if that, again, is sort of integral to your workflow. There's also a subtle difference with the processors in here, and you might be like, well, they're both M2, what do you mean? Well, it appears that Apple is using a binned or sort of a lesser processor in the new Air. We have a 8-core CPU, 10-core GPU, M2 in here, whereas we have an 8-core CPU, so same CPU cores, but a 9-core GPU chip in here. So the thing is, with chips, you know, you make them and not all of them come out perfect. So that's why we call the ones with lesser cores binned. This was a similar thing that happened with A12X and Z. A12X had lesser GPU cores. A12Z was a better yield or variant that they put into the 2020 iPad Pros, which were really not that different from the previous gens, with the exception of the camera and the new processor. What does this mean? Well, if you're doing casual stuff, nothing. You're not gonna notice a difference, specifically because the CPU performance is going to be the same. But if you are doing intensive stuff, like I just had open here, like Final Cut, you lack some GPU performance, which kind of sucks. You also lack a ProRes and 8K encoder or that capability. Maybe they turned it off, maybe the GPU core had something to do with it. And that's kind of important if you're big on video editing. So that's something to be aware of. I mean, if you're into video editing, you might be opting for a new Pro, but those are pretty expensive. So if you want to save some money and you do care about video editing, I would opt for a Pro because you get an extra GPU core for more accelerated stuff, and you also get more encoding capability, which is important if you're editing some high resolution stuff and ProRes shot with a camera or off your iPhone. However, one thing the old iPad Pro lacks is Apple Pencil Pro support. Not arbitrarily either, because, you know, the new one was specifically designed for the landscape camera orientation, so you are stuck with the 2nd-gen pencil, which isn't bad because you get pressure sensitivity and the little pressure or, you know, sensor toggle to switch between you know, tools. You also get wireless charging, albeit no Find My or barrel roll or all that here. All of this to say, once again, the iPad Air 13-inch is a great value. I mean, hands down, probably the best big tablet you can get on the market as of right now here. However, if you are looking at used iPad Pro 12.9-inch models, 5th gens included, because they're similarly powerful, and especially the M2 model that I'm talking about here, they're similarly priced. I mean, let me look at one here, buy it now. Okay, so $879 for Wi-Fi and cellular, doubled the storage, actually quadrupled the storage capacity, so 512 gigabytes here. So, you know, you can look around, there's some good deals out there. I mean, buying used is a little risky and you get lesser battery life, whatever, no warranty, but you do get more performance, you know, subtly, and also just more features too that might be important to you. So if you care, I would definitely consider looking out for these. But ultimately, it does make sense that Apple is pricing the iPad Air this way. It's pretty advanced. I think that Greg Joswiak said that the iPad Air line is just sort of the mid-tier iPad that takes pro features and brings it to a more consumer platform. So, you know, it's a great tablet, great hardware. And again, I'm so happy that consumers can get this big of an iPad under $1,000, under $1,300 now if you look at the new iPad Pros with tandem OLED and all that. So it makes a lot of sense in the long run, in the long term. But for now, we're in this sort of awkward, you know, sort of intermediary transitional period where some older gen devices just make more sense to buy for some. But again, if you're just buying this and you're a more casual user, you want possibly better battery life, a warranty, quality, this is not a bad option at all. And yeah, that about wraps up this video here. Hope it was helpful. Expect more content from me, especially post WWDC. And as always, I'm Noah, and I will catch you all in the next one.